Hello, this is Aaron at Popaholic, and I'm talking to Martin Newell, who is the leader of the Cleaners of Venus and the Brotherhood of Lizards, as well as a solo musician in his own right. How are you doing today, Martin?
I'm not too bad, and how are you?
Good. I had a few questions for you, but one of the big ones is you've had a big reissue of a lot of different recordings that were not available from the Cleaners of
tracks.
Yes, from the Cleaners of Venus until now, and people are just discovering the Cleaners again in this country. Do you have a favorite album or recording?
What from what we call them the DIY years, and
yes.
Captured Tracks are hugely responsible for resurfacing them. They've done a brilliant job. I've held back from this for some years. I've had many offers to re-release the Cleaners from Venus stuff, and even Captured Tracks took some time to convince me, but they've done a really good job.
Yes, I think
do I have a favourite one, was the question you were asking?
Yes.
That's tough. I mean, some of them I hadn't listened to for many years, just occasionally. Midnight Cleaners is pretty good from the first tranche. That I was quite proud of that. I thought that was a bit of a Rolls Royce among cassettes. And number 13, I was always rather fond of number 13.
So also with all these sets out and everything, where do you think a Newell neophyte or a beginner to your music should start?
Well, that's tough. I mean, I suppose, really, I did this album called The Greatest Living Englishman with Andy Partridge from XTC about 20 years ago.
That's how I first heard of you.
And everyone holds that up as the best. And it's kind of okay. It's very good, in fact. It's good example. It's good Martin Newell solo album as such. It's not necessarily the spirit of what I do, because Andy kind of, God bless him for it, he ironed out all the creases. In fact, I think Andy visited on me what Todd Rundgren visited on XTC. Because Andy had terrible problems with Todd.
Right.
The other guys got on with him, but Andy does admit now in retrospect Todd Rundgren did them a huge favour.
So
he made XTC double platinum in America, from what I understand. If that is what you're aiming at. I sort of like some of my new stuff, actually, and I like one or two of the solo albums. They're all right. I listen to them. They're nice, cosy albums. I'm a songwriter. I realised after however many years it is that what I'm actually good at is writing songs, and it's getting to be a lost art.
Oh, absolutely. There are some things that you've written in the past, I think, 5 years that have just been amazing. I like a lot of the older stuff and where you talk about aging. I mean, one of my favorite recent songs you've done is a song called The Beer Elves. I think I'm living that.
The Beer Elves, yeah, that is because, that's the direct kind of, what you call it, not an ancestor, a descendant, a direct descendant of, stuff from the 1930s that I heard, English stuff from the 30s.
Oh.
The Bonzo Dog Band, who were recording in the 60s, but were also inspired by, Jack Payne and the BBC Dance Orchestra, of whom you wouldn't have heard. But where was that guy, Raymond Scott's quintet, that Erwin Chusett of WFMU are very fond of as well. They did a lot of film music. 30s musicians in little dance bands. They were very, very inventive, very, very clever, both sides of the Atlantic.
Excellent. Well, getting back to what you were just saying before, how did you end up meeting Andy Partridge? Because you've been compared to him in a few ways.
Well, in the old days, it's a really odd thing that the people who I work with, Lol Elliott, the first guy who was in a Cleaners from Venus, and Giles Smith, were both massive XTC fans. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wasn't really, not initially. I liked some of the stuff they did. XTC were a bit triangular for me, almost a bit musicianly for me. I liked the Smiths, and I liked the first U2 albums. I came out of punk rock, but I liked the first two U2 albums. Boy, I think it was, and Gloria.
Oh yeah,
They were
boy.
really good albums.
Very good. Yeah, and a lot of heavy guitar in that too.
You know, I'm not very concerned about what's hip or anything, because I never was one for going to those parties or meeting famous people. All the famous people I've met, and I've met quite a few, I've met them by accident. You know, I tend to not hang around in those places.
So that's how you came about Andy, through accident?
Well, Andy, what happened was there was a record company guy I met, and I was doing a gig in London. He said, I'd like to put you together with Andy Partridge. Now, it just so happened, it's a really odd thing, but I just started doing pop poetry, and I've become rather successful at it in this country. I was getting on national radio, and Andy Partridge has somehow got hold of my first book, and one day he actually rang me up and said, how do I get hold of your second book? And he kind of only vaguely knew about the Cleaners from Venus, and I didn't know what he was ringing up about. I thought, right. Oh yeah. And he said, do you like XTC? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, he just made none such, so I suppose it was 1991.
Right.
And that was a very strange thing. And then a few months later, this record company guy said, how would you like to work with Andy Partridge? And I said, well, do you know him? And they said, well, we can get hold of him. And I said, well, he's one of the few people I probably would work with, yes. So Andy, Julie, I went down to Swindon to meet him, and I got on with the bloke really well. You know, we were like, as far as the sense of humour was concerned, we were like sort of separated at birth. You know, we just both made each other laugh a great deal. And he did describe himself. He warned me that in the studio he was somewhere between Mussolini and Santa Claus. And I know that Blur had trouble with him because they're a bunch of spoiled little queens at that time, you know.
Right.
And I had no trouble with him at all. I just said, well, somebody's got to be the gov, so you be the gov, you know, and I'll be the artist. And I said I'll probably hold out for 2 or 3 vetoes, which I did. There was only a couple of times I said, Andy, I can't do that. Not because I can't do it, but because I wouldn't do it. And once I said to him, we must remember that we're making a Martin Newell LP here, and not an XTC LP. But apart from that, he was the gov, I was he was the officer, I was the troops, and I did what I was told, and we got on great.
Great, and he also had a way of, making the production very shiny and,
Yeah, he did. He's
detailed.
Extremely. He's got hearing like a bat.
Yeah.
He's a much tidier sort of musician than me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a right slummock. I am. I'm all for. This sounds bloody great. Let's leave it raw and fuck off. Go down the pub.
Well, you've done a lot of the DIY home recording thing throughout the 80s and the 90s when it was really, inventive and hard to do. Now it's so easy with computers and, the modern studio can fit in your closet, basically, at this point.
I know it can. I made my last album, the new album, and I will advertise this because I think it's so brilliant, a Tascam Pocket Studio, 4-track.
So you're still the analog type.
Well, yeah, but I am Tascam's bitch. If they ever wanted a free advert, I'd do them one. I think they're brilliant because the Porter Studio changed my life, really. That's the original tape one, and I understand how Tascam work, and they understand how I work. So, I'm not advertising them, but I would do if they wanted, because But it's all very well having this technology, but you still need ideas, and you still need to know how to write a song. And I'm sufficiently old that when I first ever met record companies, I marched into a record company office when I was 17, and by beginner's luck, I think it was Chrysalis, just went straight in there, and they said, play us the songs, and I had a guitar. And the guy who had been a pop star before, in the very early 60s, called Fritz Fryer, he was in a band called the Four Pennies. They had a hit with Juliet, and he just said to me, if you can make a song sound good with just a voice and just an instrument, then that's a song, That's basically what he taught me. And I was 17 when he told me that. I would have been about, I suppose 1971, very early 1971. And I always, I just stuck with that. I just think if a song will stand up on guitar and voice or piano and voice in a room with no echo, then you've got a song.
Excellent. Well, this kind of leads into, your new album, Return to Bohemia. Some of the songs there have this great, like, jangly goodness that I love about a Martin Newell song. Songs like...
It's the best album I've done for probably since Greatest Living Englishman. I'm very, very pleased with it.
It's really great. I love He's Going Out with Marilyn and the
Do you think that should be a single? Because the record company said, we only do a little video single, but they've used Imaginary Seas. They want a second one. I said, let's use Marilyn, because this is what it's all about. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I also like King of the 60s. Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
That was one of the first ones I started doing when I was very ill last year. In fact, I nearly died. It was just it was something to do, No, I had an eye operation. I was exhausted, and I had this collapse. But when I came back from that, I thought I better make the best album of my life when I recover from this. So that's what I did. And the King of the 60s is just the music was just me sort of seeing if I could still get the guitars out and do all that stuff. But the lyrics are actually, looking back on it, I suppose.
Right.
Because I wasn't in the 60s. So you have to bear in mind that I was a kid in the 60s. I saw the 60s through very innocent eyes.
Right, as opposed to living through it.
I just thought it was all shiny and everything was cheerful. I just thought it was always cheerful and happy, and all through the 60s, certainly, I wouldn't have known anything about drugs or sex. I just thought it was all... I was 17 when the 60s ended. I know there are people the same age as me, but I was really quite innocent.
Right. That kind of brings me into my next question. If you could get into a time machine, like Doctor Who's TARDIS, where would you go back to?
Where would I go back to? I think I would have to go back to 1965 or 6. 1965, I say, because I wasn't in England in 1965. That was very cruel, but I spent a big chunk of the 60s outside of England. I was in the Far East because my dad was a soldier. So we were in Singapore, so we got our records about 6 weeks or 2 months later, and it was still the 60s, but I got back to England, and the place had turned from the 50s into the 60s. It had gone day-glow while I'd been away, and I felt that 1965 had been stolen from me. But I think I'd go back to 1966 rather than 1967. 1967 was great, but it almost obsesses me, the 60s, because I was there. So I remember the atmosphere, but I saw it through the eyes of a at least a child becoming a young teenager, and it affected everything I did. I think I caught the spirit of it quite well without any drugs or any of that nonsense. I really feel that it was... I still do. This is a rather esoteric idea, but I feel that if the world is on the brink of a huge consciousness change, like spring doesn't happen straight away, this was the first sunny day of spring.
Right.
And then it goes back to it's raining and it's horrible, and then it's dark, and then you get another couple of days, and then, because spring doesn't just go, hey, well, we've had winter, and now it's spring, and it's suddenly spring all the way, because it doesn't do that, does it? Because you get one really nice day, and everyone gets their surfboards out, or whatever you do in America.
That's the English weather
and then the rain comes down again, and it's cold for another month or something.
Right.
So I think what the 60s was, in the great scheme of things, was a kind of one sunny day indicating that something brilliant might be happening in the future, but that's all.
Right. You do look back quite a bit, and through the albums and through your career. I mean, what do you listen to nowadays? Do you listen to anything new, or do you just basically stay with things you like? From back
it's a funny
then.
thing you should say that. I'm spending a lot of time looking back at the moment. But the one thing I will say to you is that I'm not a nostalgist, or it might seem that. I'm actually a futurist. And all the people who were my heroes, the Beatles, they were futurists. They used the best kit they could get to try and make new sounds.
Right.
And, people don't realise that. I think, God, that was the good old days with the Beatles and all the rest of it. And it's missing the point, really. The Beatles were the future. They were this big, shiny, futuristic thing. And so were the Rolling Stones. They were the dawn. And
Right.
and they, if they could have had synthesizers, well, they did. The Beatles did use synthesizers towards the end of
They
their career.
invented it, I believe, or something close to it.
Yeah, they did. So, but the thing is, I'm a songwriter. I'm a painter. I'm not a framer. So, I think I've realised that what I'm limited to here. I'm not a great composer or anything. I'm a songwriter, and I write the songs and I choose to put them in this rather ornate Baroque 60s frame. That is my choice because that is what I like. But the song's still the same. Probably someone could come along I hope, in 100 years' time and do it on, well, I don't know, maybe the instruments will be telepathic by that time or something.
Well, that's great. Well, let me wrap it up, Martin Newell. The new album, Return to Bohemia, is out now. It's available digitally, and I believe some limited CDs too.
Yeah, well, there might be more of them if we can persuade Johnny. But John from Soft Bodies has brought them out. But if anyone wants a refresher course, Captured Tracks are doing really good deals at the moment because they've helped to bring this whole thing back again. They kind of inspired me.
And also you have the Cleaners of Venus reissues and the box sets. Volumes 1 through 4 is out. It's just a tremendous wealth of wonderfulness from Martin Newell.
A tremendous wealth of imperfect, badly recorded stuff, but there's quite good songs. I imagine.
Right. All right. Thanks so much for
Mr.
your
Jangle.
time. Thank you so much, Martin. I appreciate the call. Right. And we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you, Aaron.
All right. Have a good night now.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.